Azure Application Gateway. Now, before we do the deployment, we have to add a new subnet onto our Azure virtual network. So we have our VMs that are part of the default subnet. We are going to go ahead and create an empty subnet. See, the Azure Application Gateway is going to deploy its own compute machines, its own resources onto this empty subnet. So these resources are required for the routing of traffic onto machine. So now we are going to go ahead with the resources onto this empty subnet. So these resources are required for the routing of traffic onto machines in your backend pool. So in the Azure Load Balancer, this was a very simple network routing service. It just looked at the network layer and it would route the request onto the machines in the backend pool. But here in the Azure Application Gateway, remember this is a layer 7 routing service. That means it needs to process the application request, the HTTP request, and then do the routing accordingly. So for this, it is going to have its own infrastructure. This is completely managed by the service itself. All you need to do is to ensure that you have an empty subnet in place in an Azure virtual network. So that's what we'll do first. We are going to create that empty subnet. So for any VM, I'll go on to the virtual network. Here I'll go onto the subnets and let me create a new subnet. You can give any subnet name. I'll accept the subnet address range and let me click on save. Now we have the subnet in place. We can go ahead with the deployment of the Azure Application Gateway. So I'll go on to all resources. Here I'll hit on create. I'll search for Application Gateway. I'll hit on create. Here I'll choose my resource group. I need to choose the North Europe location because that is the location of my virtual network. Here I'll just give a name for the gateway. Now in terms of the tiering, I'll choose standard V2. WAF basically stands for Web Application Firewall. Standard is the older version of the application gateway. We have to focus on standard V2. Now in terms of auto scaling, so I told you as per our diagram, the Azure Application Gateway will create its own resources part of that subnet when it comes to the processing of the requests. So I said this is completely managed by the service itself. Increases if the number of requests on the automatically scale up to, I don't need auto scaling, and in the instant you can auto choose, and here I can choose my virtual network, and here you're not clearly saying choose app subnet front end IP address. Now that if you also have a private IP address, but at this point in time IP addresses, here are the standard options for the backends. So here I need to add my backend pool. So I'll add a backend pool. Now I'm going to create two backend pools, server and the other. So here I'll give a name, a virtual machine. You can see it can own your own web app. You can go ahead and choose a target, the IP address in the target. Now I can choose the IP config that is a VM1, it's the backend pool. I'll add another one, so I'll choose that and I'll click on add. I'll add another backend pool. Target, I'll choose the IP config which is mapped onto app VM2. I'll go on to next for the configuration. Backend, a rule, backend pool. So let me add a rule name. In addition to the front-end IP, our front-end IP address, my protocol at the moment will be HTTP application. So here we have two types of and a multiplier on multi. Next, we need to go on to the backend targets. Now, next we need to go on to the backend targets. So here, I need to now add new HTTP settings. So if I click on add new, so this setting just determines the a very simple name, listening on that list, giving this into this add thing. So what I set images in the URL, it should go on to 1VM and slash videos. Need to scroll down. So we are in the backend. We can add a path based rule. So here I'll put slash images slash star. So if you're going on target, here I need to choose my HTTP setting. So we can use the same set. Note that this has server HTML page. And let me add one more multiple target. In this corresponds on the scale of the target. Video spool as the backend target. Have a path-based rules in place. Path-based rule in place. Path-based this also in place on tags around 4 to 5. Now once the deployment is so, I'll just go on gateway front-end IP address. Here, if I go on to slash images, and if I go on to default.html, here you can see that I am on the videos based